Hello, everyone joining us live. This is Steve Stott, President of the Sherman Players, and this is Keep the Ghost Light On from the Sherman Playhouse, along with Robin Frome, my co-host, whose lovely picture you may be able to see there. He'll say hi in a moment. This week, we have, again, a varied collection of guests. We have Jeffrey Lapham, we have Barry Hughson, and we have Brian DeToma. So, what else has happened this week? Not a lot of news this week. However, quite significant for New York State at least. Movie theatres seem to be given the red light to open up again, at least outside of New York City, which will be great news to one of our friends, Dan Friedman, who runs the Bedford Playhouse. He'll be really happy about that because he can open up his cinema again. Also, I read today a post on Facebook about grants for non-profit performing arts organisations. Sounds like it's particularly towards those who have rent to pay and upkeep of premises to look after. So it might be worth checking that out. You should be able to find that on ct.gov. So, Robin's back. He's sideways. He's back. He's there. So say hello, Robin.
Hello.
There he is. He's waving. So we'll start the show. Robin, would you like to introduce our first guest?
Yes. Barry Hughson and I went to the same elementary school, and that's it. That's all we know. No. And then, how are you doing, Barry?
I'm well, Robin. Good to see you.
Good. And my parents worked with you, I believe, a little bit at Nutmeg Ballet, and on the way up goes Barry Hughson. Mon Dieu. Huge stuff for your resume. So, want to talk to you, give us a little bit of your highlights. Please don't take 2 hours with the highlights. Just a few minutes if you can, and then think about how COVID has affected where you are now, and what you've been doing to deal with it where you are, and so take it away.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in the conversation tonight. Robin and I are old friends, childhood friends. Robin had two extremely creative parents, both theater and dance people, and I remember many artistic adventures in the basement of your home in Watertown, just around the corner from where I grew up.
Just leave it at that. Leave it at that.
Yeah, it was good fun. I have actually really fond memories of both of your parents, and so I spent my childhood in Watertown. When I was 11, I started a theater company called the Youth Theater Ensemble, which became a nonprofit children's theater that ran for about 20 years in Watertown. When I was in my sort of 12, 13-year-old age, I started professional training in classical ballet, and I joined the Nutmeg Conservatory, where I also crossed paths once again later in life with the Fromes. So I had a professional dance career. I danced for the Washington Ballet in Washington, D.C. I had an injury in my early 20s, and sort of came to a crossroads and decided I wanted to stop dancing and to move into arts administration, which was really a passion of mine from very early on in life. And so I ended up at the Warner Theater in Torrington, Connecticut, where I was the Director of Educational Programming. I founded the Warner Center for Arts Education, which is the community school for the arts at the Warner. And then in 1997, I became the Executive Director and was there for another 6 years in that post. And then I met my wife, who was a professional actor, and she had an interest in moving to New York. And so I took a job. I decided to go back to dance, and I have been running dance companies since 2003 in a variety of places. I'm now in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I'll be bringing tonight a little bit of the Canadian context for you, which is quite different than the American context.
I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah.
It relates to healthcare and public education and COVID, all of those things. but I'm happy to share a bit about that. I am the Executive Director and co-CEO of the National Ballet of Canada, which is the 4th largest ballet institution in North America. I've been here for almost 7 years now. And it's a company, we have a $40 million annual operating budget. I have a staff of, there's about 500 people that work in the organization as dancers, orchestra, administration, production, etc. And COVID's been a wild ride. Let's just say the theaters here remain closed. We don't expect that they will be open this season. So our season goes from July 1st to June 30th, and we're not anticipating theaters being reopened before June of 21. And so we're really focused right now on trying to find creative ways to deliver art to our community in a way that upholds sort of the artistic integrity of the institution, but at the same time sort of responds to this need to be sort of super flexible and nimble, and to think about delivering our art form in ways that we haven't thought about or haven't spent much time focusing on. And so, yeah, so that's sort of where I'm at right now. The dancers are back in the studios taking class every day in socially distanced pods of 6. We have 80 dancers in the company, so it takes quite a few classes to get them all through on a daily basis. We did oh gosh, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we attempted to do our first live shows since March. We did a project called The Dreamers Ever Leave You, which was actually co-commissioned by the Art Gallery of Ontario, which is our major museum here in Toronto. We commissioned a choreographer to create a piece in a gallery in the museum that responded to the paintings of Lauren Harris, which was one of the group of 7 painters, very famous Canadian painter. And so he made this work about 5 years ago. And when we started thinking about what we could do during COVID, we thought this was sort of the perfect project because it was a standalone site-specific project that didn't need a proscenium, didn't need an orchestra, and could be adapted to whatever it needed to become to sort of meet the moment. And so we prepared that work for a number of weeks. And on the day we opened, which was 2 weeks ago Friday, we got in 4 public performances with a socially distanced audience of 32 people, and then had to cancel the rest of the run because we were rolled back into what they're calling here a modified phase 2, which required all performing arts centers and all public events to cease operations. And so we got 4 of 24 performances in, and sort of we're in a holding pattern now until we see when these regulations are lifted. So it's exciting to know that we could find a way to do something safely and with artistic integrity, but it was pretty disappointing to only get through the first 4 shows. So that's a quick snapshot. Or would you like me to go from
there? So just remind me, is Canada have strict rules about nobody from North America coming in or anybody from Europe?
Yeah, the border's closed to the US. And I think that the Prime Minister just said this week that his position is that until the US gets COVID better under control, that he's not inclined to reopen the border. So right now it's likely that the border will, there's some commerce, there's some crossing of the border for commerce allowed. As an American citizen, I could come to the US, but I would have to quarantine for 2 weeks when I arrived, and then I would have to quarantine for 2 weeks when I came back to Canada. So it makes a visit of a few days, a month. So sadly, I haven't seen my family and friends that live in the States since last March.
Okay. And how do you feel about the Canadian restrictions? Are you in agreement of what's going on?
In terms of COVID?
In terms of performances. Being scaled back, basically.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we in Canada, first of all, Canadians are much more disciplined and in sort of following the rules. And so in the beginning of the crisis, I think once people really understood how serious it was, people got really serious about it. And so we were able to flatten the curve pretty successfully at the front end of the crisis. And we actually had a very peaceful summer where we were having, Ontario is a province of about 14 million people, and we were having about 100 cases a day, which is pretty pretty decent. And also it's gorgeous weather here in the summer, and so everybody was able to be outdoors, and so we had an extended period of almost normal, not normal, but almost normal. And then of course schools went back into session, and they expected a spike, but I don't think they expected, we're up to like 1,000 cases a day now. Ooh. Which is why they rolled back restrictions. So I'm in favor of, I run a big arts institution that lives off of the seated event business model. So clearly I want theaters to open as soon as it's safe to do so, but I really also want to do it when it's safe to do so. I also am concerned that they may open theaters for socially distanced audiences, but then what do I do with dancers and 80 dancers and an orchestra of 80 people? How do I keep them safe and socially distanced? It's very complicated. Particularly for dance, it's complicated because it's a very physical art form. And so, the idea that we can do much socially distanced, there's some stuff we can do, but it's going to get pretty old pretty fast. So I want us to do everything we can as a society to flatten the curve until we can get either a vaccine or advanced therapeutics where people won't have to die from this. And then I want the theaters opened as quickly as possible when we get place. So
yeah, I think that's a sort of a common thread that we've heard all the way through, that we all want to be getting back. We all want to be getting back to performing and creating. Notwithstanding the people whose livelihoods depend on the industry. We often tend to focus on the performers and the creators. When really it's the support of all that which is really hurting at the moment. But just thinking about the scale at which you put on productions, because before coming on the call, I was thinking about, dance may be quite different to sort of theatrical performance, since dancers can be separated and still perform. In maybe there's maybe a lot more options for that. But thinking about the point you made about the size of the dance troupe you have, the orchestra, for a national organization, that must be very tricky to put on things of sufficient scale.
Sure, and also the dancers, we're a heavily unionized environment, so we have 5 or 6 unions in the building at any given time, and there's very specific requirements for the stage surface, for the kind of space that they work in. It's, an opera company can send a couple of singers almost anywhere with a good pianist and do something. Even with a symphony orchestra, like the Toronto Symphony Orchestra is a major symphony orchestra, and they are actually sending out sort of chamber music groups and quartets and quintets, and they're going out they're popping up in surprising places, which has been it's been like a surprise and delight campaign, because they can't bring the whole orchestra together to do anything at the moment. But for dance, it's harder. It is project like the one I described, The Dreamers Ever Leave You, which was designed specifically to be adaptable, but we don't have a lot of those in our arsenal. Like those typically in a normal year are sort of the side projects. They're not the core of what we do. So yeah, it's definitely challenging. We have made a commitment from the beginning to prioritize protecting our dancers, because they are also, they're world-class athletes that require training and conditioning every day to maintain this elite level of what they do. And I think, there is no alternative for them. Like it's not like they can go find other work. Like this is their livelihood. And if they lose their skills, like they were out of training for 5 months. That's a long time for a dancer. That's like that's losing a year of your career.
That's what I'd heard previously, that sort of 6 months out of dance is a year out of dance before you're back to the same position you were before.
It's a total killer. And then if you have dancers who are nearing the end of their career, a dancer's career, and if you make it to 40, you've done pretty well. And so you have a bunch of dancers in our company that are in their late 30s, and these are the last years of their career, and now they're losing sort of a really vital, important time in their life. So we've been trying to protect them. They're on a payroll reduction. They're all being paid. They're getting class. We're doing as much as we can creatively to keep them sort of hopeful and having something to work on. And we've tried to do the same with the orchestra. While the orchestra we can't do as much with, they are still being paid. We're negotiating a deal now that will help them have some guaranteed income till we get past this. But you know, one of the biggest sectors that was hit here, and I think everywhere, were stagehands and the sort of the IATSE guys, the stagehands union. They went from, you know, more work than they could possibly deal with to zero work overnight, and most of their contracts are gig based, so they're in trouble. That group is, and they're some really great workers, and they're critical to the success of our industry, and they are on unemployment trying to figure a way to put groceries on their table. So I'm particularly concerned about that group.
Yeah, I wonder if you have any sort of point of view on the difference between how the Canadian performing arts is being supported compared to the US performing arts. I mean, I don't know whether or not the general structure is different, whether it is still sort of more of a gig based profession for a lot of people who are involved, or whether it works differently in Canada.
Yeah, I would say for major institutions in Canada, it's night and day over the US. I think, you know, the US, we're somewhere between the US and Germany. So the US is zero support from the government, and Germany, you know, you could have 80–90% subsidy within the German art sector. Here in Canada, our government funding amounts to about 24% of our annual budget from all three levels of government, from the municipal, provincial, and from the federal government. And so it is a stable base of support that hasn't been growing in recent years, although we have a Liberal government now at the federal level. So there was a significant investment in the Canada Council a couple of years back, which is our NEA, of about $500 million over 5 years. That was to be redistributed over a period of time to the art sector. And it was really, the core institutions did get an increase, but it was really intended to democratize public funding for the arts in Canada, because it really was the haves and have-nots. You know, the big institutions often got the biggest chunk, and then a lot of independent artists and small organizations fell through the cracks. So this was really about an investment to sort of try to democratize public funding. But it is, you know, as an American in Canada, I'm blown away by the level of support, the regular level of support from the government. And during COVID, it was extraordinary. I mean, the arts and culture sector were the first in line for the first tranche of support. You'd never see that in the United States.
No,
you can't
absolutely not.
Even, you know, say the words arts and culture when it comes to the federal government in the US. Which is unfortunate, but I mean, that's the reality here. There has been did prioritize us at the front end, but now we are waiting at the back of the line for whatever comes next. Because we already got some support. Yeah,
I mean, your comment about sort of that democratization of the funding, you know, resonates with me a little bit, coming from the UK, because that's very much the cry of the arts in the UK in a normal situation, that you know, the national players get the money, and the regional don't. So it's interesting to hear that as a, you know, how that's worked out for COVID as well. During COVID, it just sounds as though there's at least a base level of support to keep the organizations bubbling over. Yeah,
and there's real public support for the arts in Canada. Like it's much more European sensibility in that way. Like in the US, you know, most of the organizations I've run are US based, and you know, you had to come up with anything but art to talk about to get people to give you money. You had to talk about education and access. You had to come up with all kinds of reasons why you should exist other than to make art. And I always found that frustrating to a certain extent, like that the art does matter too.
Yep.
And in Canada, there really is a balance of that. Like there is an understanding that if we're going to invest in these arts institutions, that they have a mandate to make it available to as many Canadians as we can.
Yep.
But at the same time, there is a real understanding that the art is at the core of who we are, and needs that art, and those artists need support to do what they do. So it's a very different environment than the US.
Barry, I've asked this question of other people, and we've had a few different types of reactions to it, but you were talking about the stagehands, you were talking about the union jobs. Do you feel that they are going to just completely leave this business and go into something else, or do you think that they're going to wait it out, or is there a percentage of either one?
I think right now they're going to wait it out. I think it's there's not much to go to right now. You know what I mean? You're sort of I think that people are still in a period of hoping that maybe there's a vaccine in January or February, and that maybe it's more widely available by May or June, and that maybe by next fall we might have a proper season. And so I think we're all sort of, that's kind of where we all are right now, is where everyone is remaining hopeful that that's a possibility. I have seen on the administrative side of our shop, we've lost 13 full-time employees on the administrative side because they can go get other jobs.
Yep.
And so when COVID started, they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that they weren't going to have the workload, that something was going to have to give. And so the ones that could find employment, marketing staff, moving from charitable sector to the corporate sector, that's a transition that's doable. Finance, certainly. IT technology, we lost a couple of people in technology because they're hireable. Like they can get a job in other sectors that are much more stable right now.
Right.
So those are the ones that are going to be harder to replace, I think.
One thing we've heard from other people who are in sort of administrative positions in the arts is that in the last few weeks or last month or two, they've been incredibly busy. They've maybe been busier or had a more varied workload than they would have in a normal season, because they're having to work so much harder to be creative and inventive and come up with ideas. Are you finding that as well?
Oh my God, I'm on Zoom. I'm on Zoom. There's no beginning to the day nor end to the day.
Yeah.
I would say everyone's working really hard. You have to imagine that our planning cycle is typically on a 3 to 4 year cycle. So we're planning seasons 3 and 4 years away. And COVID began, and we were suddenly faced with, we needed a 3-month plan. We needed 3 months at a time, and we needed 5 different versions of a 3-month plan.
Yeah.
So it has been, I think that if you're looking for a silver lining in COVID, it's that bigger institutions have had to become adaptable in ways that we are not normally very good at. Making snap decisions, not letting great be the enemy of good, like moving in a way that is very uncomfortable for us. But in some ways, it's made us stronger as a team. I think there's more leaning into the work across the organization in a way that gets away from you maybe sometimes when it becomes a little bit too routine.
Yes.
The level of creativity, the hunger to express ideas and to have the space for those ideas to be explored. So I think those are some of the things that I think that we should be holding on to when COVID is over, and not going necessarily all the way back to the way it was before.
Absolutely.
We're doing a lot of exploration on the digital front. Digital has always been a challenge for us because of the union agreements across the board. The cost of capturing content and distributing content is it's nearly impossible to make it financially work. And so we suddenly got shut down on March 12th. And I said, okay, well, what do we have in the archive?
Yes.
What do we have? Broadcast quality content. Well, the only multi-camera broadcast quality content we had was from like 1972. Like there was no current content that had been captured. So we've been working with the Canadian Opera Company, which we share the theater with. And we just actually got a $700,000 grant from the government of Canada to support a $1.3 million investment in building digital infrastructure into the Four Seasons Center, which is our opera house, and then in our studios here at the Walter Carson Center and in the Opera Company's Black Box Theater, so that we can more easily capture and live stream content on an ongoing basis going forward. And this is going to be, certainly it's going to be transformational in terms of getting out of COVID, because I actually see we're going to get to a place where we're going to be able to have some audience in, but we're going to have some people in high-risk groups that don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And so can we have a live audience and stream content to those homes of ticket holders that don't feel safe? So that's kind of the COVID formula. But post-COVID, I want to make sure that every major work that we do is captured in a broadcast quality way, so that we have a robust archive. So if we face this in the future, we've got some content to keep connected to our donors and to our community.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's very wise. And I think we'll kind of pick up on a couple of those themes as we go through. I know, I probably speak for Brian as well, as a president of a small not-for-profit theatre. Suddenly we were not in the position of the comfortable, season after season after season. We now have to actually think and be a little more creative as well. So I think we'll pick up on that theme along with the other types of way of presenting performances as we go through. But thank you very much, Barry. Don't go anywhere. Just slide along the coach, and we'll invite our next guest in, Robin.
So, Brian, let's talk shop.
Yeah. Hello there, sir. Thank you for having me.
So, Brian is president of the Town Players of Newtown, which is in a abode of about 6 other theaters in the same area. And I was just talking to Brian. He was in a show at Sherman that was supposed to go up in April and ain't happening. And but my wife's upset about it too. So, and so a lot of Alex and everybody else. But tell us a bit about how you got to the presidency of the Newtown, the Players of Newtown, and how you guys are dealing with the pandemic.
Well, I actually started my community theater involvement back in New York, because that's where I grew up, in New York. So I actually, I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree in theater arts and sciences. So I'm more different than the actual performing part of it. I was educated to be all around knowledgeable and all around involved in every aspect of the theater, which I think is what helps me be a better president. But after college, I was actually on the board of first it was the Southeast Players, which was in Brewster, New York. I was on their board for 4 years. And then in Yorktown, I was on the Yorktown Players board for 12 years, actually, 12 to 15 years. And I was their president twice, actually. Then when I moved to Connecticut and I needed to find places in Connecticut to do theater, I stumbled upon Newtown and I stumbled upon Sherman and Ridgefield. And 4 years ago is when they invited me to become a board member for the Newtown Players. And then a year later, after our current president, she moved to Nevada, they needed a new president, and they asked me, because I had experience, would I be willing to step in? And so now I've been there for 3 years, going on 4 years. And it's, I have to say, community theater in Connecticut is in much better shape than it is in New York. Most community theaters in New York, unfortunately, don't have the luxury that we have here in Connecticut, where most of them don't have their own theater. Most of them have to beg, borrow, and steal a place to do their shows. So Connecticut, it's a totally luckily it's a totally different ballgame. Our theater is very, very tiny. It's a 76 seat theater. So yes, right now, well, before COVID happened, we were just about, as every other theater was, we were about to start a new season and got totally shut down and put on hold. So it's been a struggle. It's our board, luckily for me, knock on wood, our board, which is now it's an 11-member board. They're very hands-on and very, they're a work board. Everything I ask them to do, they all step in, and in one way or another, they help. But it was a challenge because none of them ever thought, wow, what do we do if we can't do live theater? Mm-hmm. So thinking out of the box, it was a challenge to get them to say, okay, there are things we can do. Unfortunately, because our theater is so small, there's even to record something, stream it, and then out of the theater, it's just not possible. I mean, for us, God knows when we're going to be back in the theater, because with 76 seat theater, it's just too small. It's just,
yep.
You can't. There's just no way. But luckily, I do have two of my board members, especially one, Michelle Lee. She actually does all of our marketing and our press release. She's actually taking the reins and doing our first virtual show. She's doing our first virtual fundraiser, which will be in December 20th. And luckily, we've had a lot of support. I mean, we've had a lot of support. We, unfortunately, on top of being shut down by COVID, when the hurricane came, our theater got hit by massive 4 trees. The theater didn't, but it trashed outside of our theater. So we ended up having to do a fundraiser just to hopefully get the trees removed so that we can use our back patio area, because right now it's just covered. But luckily we've got a lot of support. And Michelle, I mean, we've been promoting it now, and we're going to really now start promoting. We've got our goal for the show is to raise $5,000 with it, because that will cover at least our insurance and our rent for the next 4 or 5 months, which is, yep. That's what we're planning on. We're going like on month stretches. But we've already got a lot of people signed up, because all you have, it's a $10 fee. You pay $10 to donate, you go to the link, and the day of the show, you're there and you see it. And then what we're also going to do is, even after that day, we're going to keep it up. So people who, if they can't see it that day, they'll be able to, for another 2 weeks, we're going to keep it up so they can pop in, go to the link, pay their $10 and still see it and keep it going. And we've gotten a great response, luckily. I have to say, I was worried about it because Newtown, unfortunately, it's a cute little town, but it's not a very big, it's not a big wealthy town, number one, but it's also not a major arts town. So for us, it's always a struggle to get the support that we really need. But somehow, luckily, it's starting to turn around, and people, when I put out the plea for help, we got a lot of response, not only monetarily, but we've got people offering help to help clear, help cut trees. So we've got a lot of support in a lot of different ways, which was very encouraging to see. And then once we finish with this fundraiser, we're starting to plan our next virtual show will be sometime in January. But Michelle's got it, and God bless her, she has it where it's an original show that she wrote. So luckily it's not going to cost us anything, her show. And it's a 50-minute show. And then we have, on top of that, she has a band, a husband and wife band that was part of one of our shows last season. And they're going to do a 20-minute set of Christmas carols because it's a Christmas theme. So, so it'll be about an hour and 15-minute program. And luckily that's going to start our virtual run.
Well, good. Good. Well, good luck with that. One thing that that concerned me as you know, sort of running a playhouse about virtual shows is ensuring the quality is,
Right.
it is up there enough to make it something that people will really want to see, and also lives up to the quality of the shows that you would put on
Right.
live.
Well, that's the thing. Michelle, when she brought this to me to do, she flat out said, she goes, Brian, this is not going to be what people are used to seeing when they look. It's not going to see people just sitting there reading and just sitting in the seat. She's got it's a 3-character show. So, but each of the 3 characters, they have their setup, and she actually has them interacting within within the Zoom, so that they're going to be walking and talking and acting, and she's put a lot of work into it, and she wouldn't do it if she said, she goes, I won't do it if I can't do it as an actual performance. I don't want people just sitting in a seat reading and expect people to pay for that.
Yes. Yeah. No, that sounds great.
And we actually just had our last board meeting, and she gave me an update, and guess who was in it, Robin? John Squires.
Oh, nice.
Really? Wow, you've got John Squires. There we go.
He's our main character.
Yeah.
But again, that's one of the positives that happened out of COVID, because there he is in his apartment in New York, and he can be part of the show for us in Newtown. So it's a wonderful thing.
So,
yes.
Brian, is this all zoomed in, or are they in the sun?
It's going to be stage? She has her on Zoom. Yep.
Is she making John sing?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
That's in his contract.
Originally, her idea was that she was going to have Christmas carols, but that sort of went out the way. And then it's better that we have this. The husband and wife team are a professional band, so it's better to have them do their thing. Because that was my concern. I was like, if it's going to be out there for anybody in there, anybody to pay and see, it's got to be up to our standards. So
yes,
I never
absolutely.
have to, Michelle, I don't have to worry about that with, because she understands, and she knows that for us, this is our first virtual performance, so it has to be top notch.
Well, I'm with you on that, because we're at the Sherman Playhouse, or through the Sherman Playhouse, we're having our first virtual performance on Halloween, and it's been written and directed by Mr. Frome here, and I've held his feet to the fire and said it's got to be high quality. So watch this space. That's coming up. But absolutely, the also when it's the first thing that you're doing of that kind, right. The idea is don't overreach. Don't try and have a cast of thousands. No. Try and do something manageable and something that you absolutely can be proud of. So well done for getting that organised. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you put on in the holidays.
In fact, Mr. Frum, I'm going to be tapping you, I think, for ideas for the one in January.
All right. I'm free.
Well, this actually does speak a little bit to another of the themes that we came up with, and over the previous weeks, and that certain people in creative positions, again, are finding themselves busier than ever, because they have time and availability. Right. To spend on these kind of projects. They're not in rehearsal continuously. They're not out every night doing what they do. So that's a bit of a blessing for those who need to tap into that creativity. Well, thank you, Brian. Again, stay there. Just the two of you can scooch a little bit further across the across the coach, and Robin.
Yep. So Jeffrey Lapham, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on. I think this is the first time we met face to face, as it were, but I've heard so much about Shakespeareans all through the years. I taught at Memorial. I taught drama there at Memorial Middle School, and I don't know if you were part of it then, but they brought a Romeo and Juliet vignette type of production and performance there, and that's one of the times I saw it. And I know you operated out of Waterbury. Was the office next to Arabesque?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, we get people coming in asking for costumes, and it confuses the new employees.
And the guy,
We're not aware that we do anything giving out our costumes.
And
But
I
the
hope
costume
God
rental
bless-
place next door.
right. And I hope, God bless him, Mike is still there and trying to make a thing out of it. Poor guy. But he's been there since my father was teaching at UConn, and it's been a wonderful place. And you guys have been doing some great stuff and growing. And so give us some sort of highlights of your career leading up to this, and what you guys are doing with the pandemic, and how you're dealing with it.
Sure. So yeah, I co-founded Shakesperience with Emily Mattina, the artistic director. That was in 1996. We piloted some programs to Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York from another theater company where we met. It seemed to take off. We started with middle school kids doing in-class workshops on Shakespeare. It became, the schools that we piloted wouldn't take a year off. We needed a year to pack up and move, and found the company in what turned out it was Waterbury. They wouldn't take a year off for us. So we had to do double duty and tap dance and travel interstate and, get those shows in. But some of them have been taking, 3 Middlebrook Middle School in Wilton, Connecticut has been taking 3 days of workshops every year for 22 years. And that's the heavy lifting program, is 2 actors in a classroom with a trunk of hats and scarves, and doing Shakespeare scenes with the students who are possibly more surprised that they're acting in front of their class than the teachers are. When we moved the company, it was Emily and another actor doing the programs, and I was freelancing around the state, Yale Rep, Hartford Stage. I got to theater not by being in front of the camera or in front of an audience, but through the scene shop, actually. So I was freelancing technical theater all around. And I mention that because that's about where we are since COVID. Our budget's been knocked back to the point where it can't support my executive salary anymore. The entire staff is on furlough. We had been planning to move Shakespeareans. After 20 years of creation, we have enough of a catalog to be able to just keep those things going and have a cycle of so that no kid that goes K through 12 can ever see the same program at the same, that they've already seen. So we had planned to move it more towards a gig economy with a wider array of actors to be able to perform the programs, going out to schools which has always been the business model. And that's where the double hit came with COVID, is that not only did we lose our performance venues, the schools, but the schools weren't in session themselves. And so that's been a difficult challenge and an opportunity as well. Because within the first couple of weeks, we had converted all of our in-class workshops to be able to be delivered on Zoom, and each student can bring 5 items next to their computer or mobile phone and be able to take part in the scenes from the folklore or the Shakespeare or the mythology workshops that we always do. So March 13th, everybody went on furlough. Took us about 2 weeks to voluntarily Zoom our way through getting the shows back to a more digital format. And we've been delivering 3-week summer school programs, week-long acting classes. We've done the workshops that we normally do in some of the schools. Some of the teachers say it bolsters enrollment. And now not only can we work with the actors that we had on March 13th, but there's 22 years of Shakespearean's family all around the world. We've worked with people in China who got stuck there teaching English, but who had been actors for Shakespeareans years ago. so lots of strange, different generational interactions and introductions have been made. It's been very encouraging, and the students are really enjoying it. It's some semblance of what they had before, if they can stomach, like the rest of us, one more hour in front of the computer screen.
So, the students are missing being together. We talked a lot about that, the communal aspect of everything. But are they generated enough to just keep doing it on Zoom, or do you feel that they're getting zoomed out, as some people were saying?
Some are and some aren't. Some of our there was a student who we met at a performance. No, she signed up for an after school program, and she was very mousy and very shy. And 3 days later, coincidentally, at her school, Shakespeareans came in, and she knew the actors in the play because they had taught her a few days before. And so suddenly she went from the mousy, shy kid to the rock star that knows the big actors from Shakespeareans. And that was a huge boost in the arm. She started taking every acting class we could offer, every after-school program. But she and her family, very dedicated members of the Shakespeareans family. But she just has had enough Zoom. And so she'll participate in some of our programs, but not a lot of the longer term ones. And she's still on the fence about whether or not to do the holiday show that we're working on, our annual holiday show.
What's the holiday show consist of?
So the holiday show that we do is sort of a final performance for the acting class students that take the 13 sessions in the fall. And it's built to work in the professional actors that teach them, so that they get to perform with their professional actor teachers, but then also involve members of the community, so that we can outreach to the community about what we do in education and what we do in the arts and what we do in theater. At that little former jewelry store studio next to Arabesque. So it's called The Gift of Peace, and it's sort of multi-denominational holiday story. We've strung together, and in sort of a surprising way at the end, the Gift of the Magi, the Christmas Eve Truce of World War I, and the something called the what was the children's book where I read it in? It's an old fable. It's an old story of a couple reunited after World War II by a piece of fabric, and we have by tapestry, and we have adapted that to take place in a place called Winterberry, in a storefront theater, which is completely fictional. And some madcap things happen that certainly never happened to the real actual theater that I work at. And it's a comic close to the little trilogy of stories, pretty well enjoyed by community, and the kids just shine in it. It's great.
And awesome. how can people see that? How can people view it?
That will be all virtual, as all of the Saturday acting classes are virtual. They will. I was speaking with my general manager today, and we asked her how the filming schedule was going, and she said, we're getting everything we can on tape, because some Saturdays some kids can't show up because soccer or whatever, so we're getting everything we can. And then we'll put it together, and the things that need to be tweaked or touched and manipulated, we'll do that in more towards the end of the acting classes. And
you're broadcasting that to
that'll
the public
be filmed
or
on
internal?
Zoom, and it'll go on our Shakespeareans YouTube page. We'll sell tickets to it and things like that. And as Brian was saying, it'll be on there for a little while after that too, for people who missed it live. Much like this, I caught a number of the Ghostlight sessions, standing on a ladder painting my house, actually. Just
Oh, good.
earbuds in.
It's a lot.
Very good, very good. You brought up this notion that you've got contacts all over the world, you know, which are really from the work you've already done. Robin mentioned this as well on other shows, that suddenly the reach is further. You know, one of the bright spots of this is that you know, you're now able to reach out further because you're in a virtual setting. Have you found that is a an advantage, or is it something you're having to work hard at to manage?
It's super exciting to, you know, before March was over, we were trying to do our signature Shakespeare workshop with kids that were relatives of staff members in Kansas and California and Chicago, and we were as surprised as anybody was that it really held together, that the signature workshop really held together that way. And it was a terrific opportunity. I've been telling people that, you know, anywhere where they currently, because all my actors speak English, currently where they speak English, we can be doing in-class workshops on Shakespeare and acting classes and all of these things. We're no longer restricted to the 4 state partial, some of them partial states, that we can get to in a van to get to the school at 7 o'clock in the morning and set up and do a performance and leave at lunch and go to the next school and do another performance in the afternoon. We can be anywhere, but there's no bandwidth right now, with students being our audience and the teachers having to have 6 different plans from Sunday about how they're going to teach the kids. And although we're able to come into the classrooms virtually, there's almost no bandwidth for them to even know that we're offering that, or be able to work it into their hybrid models of education. It's very difficult to get any feedback. And I have spoken to teachers live on, you know, on the side of the cross country, my son's cross country meets, or something like that, and speaking to teachers and principals and saying, you know what, we would love to. I guarantee you it won't happen, because there's
so many other things to think.
Work with you.
Yeah, so many other things. There's a lot of moving parts. So it seems that when it does come together, it can come together, you know, quite surprisingly. We heard last week, you probably followed that one, about a number of initiatives which had suddenly become very successful out of
the dinner theater, not dinner theater, the murder mystery.
The murder mystery that kind of came out of the dinner theater, out of the live event stuff. You know, it's more accessible. And if it works in this format, then that's great. But as you say, it's kind of tapping into that market as well, and have the market looking.
That makes it extra difficult, because you know, you're trying to work with another institution, and that they're already overloaded with, you know, are the desks 6 feet apart?
Yes. Barry, I just want to ask you on that. Do you take part in outreach to institutions and organizations, and how's that been affected?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have a program called U-Dance, which introduces ballet and dance to grade schoolers. That's sort of a flagship program for the organization. It's been around for a number of years. And that we actually had launched a virtual platform for that program, I would say about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, because we're a national institution, but we don't tour extensively nationally anymore. We do more international touring than we do national touring. We had to find a new way to reach more Canadians as the National Ballet. And so we launched the U-Dance program as a live stream across Canada. And that program on an annual basis reaches every province and territory in the country, and is growing each year. So there's a live audience in Toronto that are kids that are busted from the local schools. But while they're having the live experience, there's this virtual experience that's happening at schools all the way up in northern Canada, coast to coast, east, west. And so in that sense, that program actually had already made that virtual shift. So right now it's a matter of what can the dancers do together, because, you know, right now it's not just the audience that's the problem, it's also what the artists can do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We've taken the opportunity to launch a program called Sharing the Stage, which is, we have a fairly large social media following for the company. And so we've invited local cultural dance institutions and ethnic dance institutions to have master classes on our platform. And some of our dancers participate in the master class. And then there's like a dialogue after the class to talk about the differences in the art forms and the sameness as well. And that's been actually a really successful program. Lots of people tune in. And it's actually put eyes on a lot of really wonderful work that's happening in the broader dance community here in Toronto. So we're doing what we can. I think we have a program called In Studio, which is actually a sort of a dance appreciation program for teens and adults. And we've moved most of those classes online now. So we're doing the best we can, you know, under the circumstances.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's interesting to hear how different organisations are reaching out, and I do wonder, you know, with the sort of local theatre scene around our part of Connecticut, if we will gain an audience beyond our fans, and who will tune in when they see that we've got something out there. That I found that quite exciting, that we might sort of grow our presence a little, and you know, who knows, maybe in your 76-seat theatre, Brian, you'll have thousands of people sort of watching online. You know, you'll have that.
Only pray that would happen.
Yeah. So it'd be a nice position to be in. Be a really nice position to be in.
One thing that worried me with the Playhouse, Steve, and Brian, you may be going through this. I don't know about Jeff and Barry. I mean, Barry was talking about productions that are in-house, but we have to pay for royalties. I mean, if we want to put on even a small show like Tally's Folly or something like that, we still have to pay for royalties. I don't know how the royalty business is going these days, but I'm sure they're not letting it up. You know what I'm saying? So if we're going to do it virtual, or it's kind of like it's actually I think they can make a case that it's going against their policy of not recording their stuff. So you have to get special dispensation.
You're having to get special rights. That's absolutely and it's not simply a case of you know, we'll get the streaming rights for it. The mechanics don't exist within the industry to license for broadcast for certain shows. It's not a case of, you know, the author says yes.
Right.
There's a whole that's another, and you've seen this. You know, there's a number of licensing organisations, but the licensing organisations for video production are different to the licensing organisations for stage production, are different for the licensing organisations for music, are different from you know, there's not a one-stop shop. You can't go to the Theatre Depot and get your play off the shelf.
So what you get are new plays by people that are okay with not paying. You know, you don't have to pay the royalties or anything like that.
We also found that the royalties to stream, like when we were going to do, we had thought about doing a show that we would have to get the rights for. When you go to get the rights to stream the show virtually, it's even more expensive than if we were going to do it in our little theater. Because again, that's what they're seeing, is that, well, now you're going to reach all these thousands of people. So, so
hopefully that may change. Yeah, hopefully, you know, because we're not really in a position to do anything else, maybe there'll be some pressure to push that down. I don't know. We can dream. We can dream about that. And clearly, the advantage of Shakespeare is he doesn't want any money off you. He's not looking for any money.
He's pretty bad about collecting.
He is, isn't he?
Well, he is rolling in his grave these days. So.
Oh, yeah. But Yeah, it did seem, and this isn't to diss Shakespeare at all, but it did seem that the minute that COVID struck, people started coming online. It was Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It was lots of Shakespeare because we don't have to pay for that.
I remember
they left the
during
Greeks
the Great
alone.
Recession.
Amazing.
I remember hearing during the Great Recession that that people go more towards the classics in times of trouble and need and
Yep.
concern.
Yep.
And like Barry was saying, we looked back and we said, how many broadcast quality programs do we have and ready to go? And it was zero. We were so involved in not, as I think Brian said, not thinking about what's going to happen when you can't do art live. That we were just going thing to thing to thing, creation to creation. And I sort of tongue in cheek have said to people, we're the world's worst documenters of our actual work. And that has come around to really bite us.
You're true.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
a lot of that is because you're not allowed to,
Right.
Tape anything that's not an original. You're really not allowed.
Yeah.
I have been able to. I could have gotten around that until I was working with the union, but now that I'm working with the union, we did do a behind the scenes fundraiser in early August. It was a 2-part series on the making of 12th Night, and we were able actually to work with Equity and get a couple of Equity actors to appear in the program. It had heavy restrictions; it could only be available for 4 days and things like that. But they were able to work with us on that limited scale.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the war that's happening in professional theater in the U.S. between Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA about whose jurisdiction these digital projects fall under. I mean, the unions are warring with each other, and meanwhile, actors are out of work and can't put food on the table. It's really sort of an insane moment.
Yeah, we've heard a little bit of grumbling about unions in a couple of shows, simply because, again, they'll be in the same position that this is a whole new world, and larger organisations that aren't able to respond, whether it's in the arts or anywhere else. We'll struggle. There'll be a lot of movement and not a lot of advance. So that's quite understandable
to ask about organizations that are so heavily involved in the creative arts not necessarily being creative enough to think their way out of this box.
I mean, that's true. On the whole, the individuals we've spoken to have been very positive, very creative, and are working very hard to make things happen. But I can absolutely understand that if you are in a position where you are in a regular format, and on the whole, the arts is a regular format, especially with what we do. We put on 4 or 5 shows a year. We can plan the season in advance. It's a rolling game, and occasionally we'll try and do something a little different in between. We're now in the position of trying to do something different in between all the time.
Yes.
And that's that's a challenge. That's a challenge. It is an opportunity, though. As Brian pointed out, it is an opportunity to do something new and different, and even down to the practicalities. It's been a great opportunity for us to clear out the back of our stage. It really has. We've found stuff we haven't seen for 20, 30 years that can finally go in, finally go in the dumpster. So again, we've even been able to take the opportunity to do some of those housekeeping things that really we'd struggled to do between shows. So there's always a silver lining, and certainly what I'm hearing from our guests tonight is, more of the same. There's a case of having to be creative in order to do what you need to do, but also finding there are some opportunities available that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily have even turned your attention to. So personally, I'm still optimistic. Ask me again in April, but yeah, I'm optimistic at the moment.
I have a prediction for everyone, and my prediction is that if we can make good decisions and act with care as we navigate the next number of months, that we are going to have a series of years of the best years of our careers, because I do think this moment no one could have imagined or planned for this moment, right?
Right.
And I think our communities are beginning to understand what it feels like to live in a world without us, without artists, and without places to come together as humans to experience something together, whether it be a movie or a theater or a symphony, a ballet, or a pop concert. And I do think that people are going to flock back the moment that they feel confident that it's safe to be there. And I'm looking at that. I agree with you. I'm 100% optimistic. The key is we have to get there.
Yes.
Getting there is where we've got to be really thoughtful and courageous and
patient.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to throw a little tiny bit of hope in that, and to back you up, Barry, on that prediction, in the early September, we the Shakespeare in the Park division of the volunteers that work with me to fundraise for Shakespeare in something we call Shakespeare in the Litchfield Hills. It's just a Shakespeare in the Park format. We went to that venue and we invited a jazz singer and her three other bandmates to named Wanda Hughson. Wanda came out and sang, and we sold 130 tickets to it, to socially distanced in pods, painted on the grass, really safe, thoroughly masked, hand washing in the whole 9 yards. It was very careful and very measured, and people were just so happy to be out of the house with live music that they can sing along to and tap their foot and see other people enjoying the same thing communally with them. And it was that glimpse I needed to see that people are thirsting for this, and that they will be there when we can be there for them. Right.
Sounds good, huh, Steve?
And this is again a common theme. The arts will survive. The arts has been struggling, as Robin has pointed out a few times. The arts have been struggling forever. It's been on resuscitation sort of permanently, and continues on. There's always a thirst for it, and I'm quite encouraged to hear those words. And I know as a sort of local arts administrator, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that, when the light comes back on, there will be people there to come and see things, and there's likely to be a big well of creativity that's there to dip into as well.
That's something that we did, though. Actually, I think about maybe two months ago, we actually sent out a survey to our subscription, and just to see take the temperature of what everybody was thinking. And overwhelmingly, that's all we heard was that we can't wait to come back to you.
Good.
We're safe.
Good.
So if we can just manage, like Barry said, if we can manage, get through it, they'll be there. They'll be there.
And it's up to us as well to reach out, because there's a lot of people hurting within the performing arts industries, as we've said. Stagehands are have nothing to handle, so what are they going to do? As well as other people in the community who really need the sensibility of art to offset not just COVID, but everything that's that's stressing people at the moment. So so that's great. That's great. Well, I think we've just about run out of time, and I don't want to keep you guys on Zoom any longer than you have to be, because you know, you're living on here. So thank you so much for your contributions tonight. This has been a great show. We haven't been able to broadcast live because of probably my technical ineptitude, but we'll post this this edited video on the Showman Players Facebook page, possibly tonight, maybe tomorrow, but it'll certainly be on there by the end of the day tomorrow. It's been great again. I'm always blown away by the different perspectives that we have, and as I say, above all, the optimism and hope that that we hear in these chats. So all that remains is for me to say thank you very much. Do come back and see us again. Watch the shows. Maybe in a few months' time we can have you back to see how the world has changed since we can maybe test those predictions of Barry's, and we'll see how we go with that. So I think we just have to say goodbye from Robin. Say goodbye, Robin.
Say goodbye, Robin. I always do that.
You do that, don't you? You do that. There we go. It's nice.
Thanks.
It's nice.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.
Okay, and thank you so much, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next week for more Keep the Ghost Light On. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
All right.
Bye. Be well, stay safe.